Yes, so we've had a lot of input and ideas from the panel now, so I'd like to open the floor for questions from the audience. Do you have any further questions or comments about what website owners should do or could do to improve accessibility? Yes, please.
I think what Raf suggested, this structure for a policy process, is extremely good and extremely important. And I think if there is a European directive, suddenly tens of thousands of communes, for example, or tens of thousands of institutions who have inaccessible websites will be confronted with a new law, or with in turn with directives in their national countries that will mandate them to become accessible. So for them, I think it's extremely important to have a policy process which takes them on the right track without, confronting them first of all with a standard like WCAG, where they see, okay, we will fail this, no chance, our website is really bad. So I think it's very important to be able to have a graded, if you like, a graded access to an accessibility train, where you start with acknowledging what your status quo is, but also make decisions on how you want to improve, set yourself a timeline, make decisions, have clear responsibilities. And I think such a process would immensely help all those organizations for which this is a new issue, for bad reasons maybe, or for, just for historic reasons. And it's very important to, bring them on the right track. So I think it's very good.
Well, yeah, thank you very much. I think the one big problem, I think, for starters, WCAG is a very, very, very valuable tool. I've been a long time fan of the specification, but it is a tool with a very specific purpose, and it is being used also for evaluating policies, which creates a problem because WCAG says very specifically that you have to meet all criteria, all criteria from a given level. If you don't, you're not meeting the criteria, which is often in practice translated, you're not accessible, which is technically true, but sometimes it's even said you're inaccessible, which is not true either. But the problem is black or white. If you're not fully conforming, then you're not conforming. It's yes or no, and then it's a no. And it should be, I think, very strict in WCAG itself, but translating it into a policy creates an issue with that, because there's nothing between good and bad. And in my experience, a lot of organizations who are trying their best to improve on their website, and in the side they're almost there but cannot claim full conformance, then they're treated exactly the same as an organization who has done nothing at all. So why should they do anything? Because they get no credits for it at all. So at least that it is visible where they are and what they are going to do about the missing points, I think that creates a lot of extra value. Yes.
So for procurement, I think this is the key for change in many ways. Does the approach you are outlining, Raf, will that fit in well with public procurement?
Yes. I've made a model. In the model, I pay some attention. That can be one of the reasons why you cannot fully conform, because you're using a tool or you're using a vendor who is not able to deliver what is promised. But you have a contract, and in practice that contract is not often ended prematurely. So one of the measures that can be taken by an organization is, when we have to procure again, then we must include accessibility more explicitly. We have to do a better job than the previous time. So that can be one of the measures taken, and they can be planned as well. So yes, procurement can be integrated into this model, and information can be provided about what the organization is planning to do and when it's going to happen.
A WCAG level 1 plus or a WCAG level 2 minus a bit than the other. And the problem is, what are you going to allow to be dropped out? how important are different issues. I mean, you can say, right, we don't need alternative text tags because anyone who's not blind doesn't use them. So, right, so if our site is not aimed at someone who's blind, then we can get away with it. Or we can say, well, our software won't let us put it in. But then you get all sorts of funny arguments going on and discussions, and it becomes very messy. Whereas if you say, right, we have achieved WCAG level 2, everything's done, fine, we know where we are. Or, in that case, we haven't achieved level 2, we have achieved level 1, and we are working towards level 2. And that's really the only level I think you can work at. I don't think you can start picking and choosing little bits and saying, well, I've got this bit but not that bit, and therefore I ought to be the same.
I think Raf is approaching this from a different. I completely agree with you that this cherry picking. I think Raf is coming from a different approach. WCAG is a measure, and it's to say, okay, if you do not meet those criteria, then certain people are being left out, or certain requirements are not being addressed. That's what the job of what's saying. But let's say you developed a website and somebody checks it and says you are not meeting WCAG, or you're checking your own website and you're saying you're not meeting WCAG, or two people, okay, and they're both not meeting. One is because they're just being ignorant. And the other is because they actually did all they could, but then a new version of a browser came out or something, and the alt text attribute that you're talking about that they actually put in doesn't appear anymore. So they're both not meeting WCAG, but one I think we can appreciate that is doing more work, and they have a plan. They say, okay, we're not meeting it because of such and such reason, and we plan to fix it within the next X months or whatever. And somebody who just says, I don't know, whatever. I think that's kind of, if I understand your model, Raf, explained in my terms, how I am picturing it, this is how it would go. If you can demonstrate that you're actually trying to address accessibility, why something failed, and what your plans are to repair it, is more valuable than just saying yes or no. This is where I think it was coming from.
Okay. Now, in my report, I called it conform, which is full conformance to WCAG 2, or perform, show what you are doing if you don't fully conform. And it's a rather straightforward forward approach, but it provides room to plan improvement instead of the big, all or nothing approach, because that is not working as intended. In our experience in the Netherlands, organizations, they stop working on accessibility actively simply because they're not able to get a quality mark. Well, this is not, the quality mark is very valuable, but the focus on a quality mark also sometimes gives problems. And you don't want that type of problems. You just want accessibility to be improved. And by being able to plan, to know about your shortcomings and to plan for improvement, you can at least overcome that type of problems.
Okay. There was another comment over there.
Yeah, I think another example might be if somebody, if an organization at some point gets the quality mark and gets a certain level, then they think they have it all arranged. And we sometimes find out this in the Accessibility Foundation, when we do an audit and they get the green logo, they think they reached the end goal, but they did not reach it in a structured level. So we see a lot like the second or the third year, because a lot new content is created, and it was like a project to reach this goal, that in the end, the second or the third year, they won't reach it anymore, because it became a project. And I think the method that Ralph is using gets them to another level.
Okay, no more questions from the audience, so maybe we can talk a bit more about, I think this model is a very good idea, and we've heard some comments how it can be useful in different contexts. And we also had this comment from Detlef earlier. We said there are a lot of website owners who don't know a lot about accessibility, and maybe they even know less about this kind of process that could be established to achieve accessibility. So who could be responsible for making these processes more well known, or to really get website owners to take up these kind of approaches? To put it more bluntly, is this a policy question? So should we have this kind of approach as part of a policy requirement that you have to do it in that way, or is it just a good practice, a suggestion for site owners to follow?
Well, I think that is a question that should be asked to policymakers. I see myself as a miller. I don't bake the bread. I just deliver the flour, so to speak. This is a component which can be used for policy reasons, but making it into a policy is up to policymakers. That's not my role, so to speak. So, but of course, I have not made it just to have a piece of paper ready. So, I would be very happy if some policymakers want to take a look at it, of course.
Yeah, I can't really. Sorry, there was a hands up. I can't really answer the question. I think it's more a policy. I think there are many different policies. It would be interesting to have a look at different kinds of policy approaches and how this is done and how this is addressed. We focus really on that measuring rod and on the technicalities to allow such policies to exist in the first place. I think there might be different approaches. I do think it's a very good approach to give them more context, whether it's really just that model or maybe there could be other models or something. But the idea of providing more context to why a website or what the plan is of somebody doing something, I think is a very useful approach.
Still one addition to this question, whether this is a policy, how this could play out as a policy. I think if this directive is released finally and turned into national law, I could imagine that national governments can make all the entities that are subject to the directives that are created on the national level, make them enter themselves into some website, which could look a little bit like the benchmarking results we had today, where you have all the communes and cities and ministries and so on listed there, maybe by country, and they would just stand there. Maybe there would be nothing. And if there's nothing, that just means that they haven't made any entry where they stand in this process. So that tells you something, right? And it could well develop a kind of positive effect that some cities, some ministries and so on start putting themselves in. And it slowly goes up. So as they raise their awareness, as they make progress in this, there will be more in this list, and there will be some force generated by those which are not yet in the list to enter themselves. So it could be a kind of positive reinforcement loop by which you try to bring everything together and by that get an overview where in this policy process the individual organization stands. I mean, maybe this is a pipe dream, but if the governments can force their organization, at least their ministries, and the federal Länder in Germany could force their ministries and so on to enter themselves there with a blank at the start. And then you could basically see this as a big place to watch how improvement is taking place. I mean, maybe this is a pipe dream, but this is how I would picture it.
It's good that you mentioned this. I maintain an overview which shows which municipalities, provinces and water boards that we have in the Netherlands are conforming to WCAG and on which level, but also which have a statement. One of the problems is that it was done also because of this study. It was done once. By doing it once, you cannot measure progress. And by now, because it was carried out like 10 months ago, the statements are no longer valid. Because they have planned, well, in the first quarter of 2015, we're going to improve this. It's still on there. So what is needed is a system in which you can also evaluate the validness of statements and provide a signal, for example, to a municipality, say, hey, in your statement it says that you would have solved that by April 2015. It's now May, and it's still on that website. Please update your statement. That way you can see, you can at least start to measure progress. And I think that would be an interesting thing. But one of the main challenges here is the data quality, because it's very tempting to provide information or to make statements which you wish you were true, but you cannot underpin with substantial evidence. So that's one of the challenges that we face: how to be on the right level. When is a statement of good quality? And for that you need good quality indicators. That's why I came with the timeliness and completeness and the correctness slide, because that is, I think, it's very important. And if you make it public, then anyone can act upon it, and that makes it interesting as well. In this report, I also described about supervision and about the supervisory role, and about one of the scenarios is that supervision is decentralized, for example, to the council of a municipality. They have the power to supervise that organization, but they don't have the information for properly supervising what is going on in the field of accessibility. If that information is available, my assumption is that they might take up that point and might steer upon improvement of the accessibility of the municipal websites.
Okay, seeing that we are almost at the end of the day, I'd like to give the panelists the opportunity to summarize your thoughts and maybe give one or two recommendations to website owners. What are the most important things that should be done, or the things that should be done first?
Okay, my recommendation to the website owner is there's a lot to start with immediately. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit. Was having a side discussion, I don't remember today, about seeking, always striving for the absolute, or always striving, and that's no doubt. I mean, as somebody who's impacted by inaccessibility on a daily basis, yes, we do need to strive for absolute accessibility. But I think also, pragmatic and just encouraging organizations. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit. There's a lot of things that can be done immediately. Get started. Think about your color contrast, for instance, on your website. Doesn't cost you anything to tweak the colors, and it will work better on mobile. There you go. Business case as well. So, things that you can get started with right away. There are other things that will need longer-term planning and longer-term thinking about, but start planning for those, start thinking about them. The framework that Ralph introduces is one approach. So I think maybe motivating and getting website owners to get started, that would be maybe my message. You can get started. Don't be afraid. It's not as scary as it seems. It is possible, and step by step, you will increase. But it does need to be a a deliberate approach. I'm not able to say the word. Not a one-off thing. I think we've heard that. I think that was an important comment. I think we see that a lot, that organization kind of like, okay, now we do accessibility, and then afterwards it's now to something completely different. And they forget all about accessibility. It needs to be something that is an integral part of how you do business, but you can get started with it right away.
Well, my tip, maybe for organizations or for those responsible for the website, take a look at that Canadian approach. There are all the roles and tasks for many people in the organization are well described. Identify the people that are meant by what is stated in that Canadian standard, and try to involve them in your own processes. they have a role there, and they can make a difference because they can decide on budgets, they can decide on priority. So that might be an interesting start and build on from there.
Okay, thanks a lot. I think that were some very encouraging statements to conclude this session, that it's really about getting started and doing something and take it from there.